A person is telling his or her story, a story of pain. How do I get others to hear my story? You know what, Pastor Greg? I think there's a fantasy out there that if we do more outside, that we will achieve solutions. But I think the way we measure solutions is in this small circle. If we live this forum, felt more understood, I think we have made one step closer to the solution. But if we didn't feel that, regardless of what you do outside the circle.
On today's episode, we continue the race relations dialogue as we sit and talk with pastors and a police sergeant from the Gilbert, Arizona area. As always, we want to understand whether empathy and understanding is truly possible. Marshall Rosenberg once said, "Empathy is a respectful understanding of what others are experiencing. Instead of offering empathy, we often have a strong urge to give advice or reassurance and to explain our own position or feeling. Empathy, however, calls upon us to empty our mind and listen to others with our whole being." Carl Rogers said, "We think we listen, but very rarely do we listen with real understanding, true empathy. Yet listening of this very special kind is one of the most potent forces for change that I know." Welcome to Communal Awakening, a place where we give space to embrace our pain with grace. Join us now as we listen in.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our second episode of Communal Awakening. We are joined here by our esteemed colleagues, my esteemed colleagues from the Gilbert area, in addition to a fellow sergeant. And we want to have them go ahead and just introduce themselves real quickly as we begin. So whoever wants to begin first can go right ahead and introduce yourself.
All right, I'll go first. I am Sergeant Dan Brause with the Gilbert Police Department. I've been here just a little over 13 years. I'm in charge of the Public Affairs and Community Engagement Unit.
I will. I'm Pastor Eric Jones. I pastor Evident Life Church here in Gilbert, Arizona. And we've been in the downtown Heritage area for almost 6 years now, but we've been active in Gilbert for, wow, it's been about 11 years. I will remind you though, Pastor Greg, that I do need to leave here in about 15 minutes or so with a hard 2:30 stop a meeting. So just when I disappear, that's the only reason I'm disappearing.
No worries. We appreciate your time. Pastor Cruz, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Elizabeth Cruz. My husband and I, Pastor Jose Cruz, we pastor a church here in Gilbert, Arizona, Love United. We've been involved in ministry for 35 years with the Hispanic community. We have planted 4 churches, 2 in California and 2 here in Arizona. And I am very blessed to be here with you talking about these issues. Thank you for the invite.
Thank you so
I'm
much,
original
Pastor
from
Cruz.
Chile. I'm original from Chile, South America too. Okay, just in case.
Awesome. You're welcome. We've been having some technical difficulties with our next guest, but Bishop Johnson, can you hear us and can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, pastor of the Empowered Church International, Arizona, bishop overseer from the organization is the Western Baptist State Convention, which is part of the National Baptist Convention as well. Again, just empowered derived from wanting to be in a position to empower people and give them an opportunity of a different path, also coming from some of the tougher neck of the woods where we grew up from, where I grew up from particularly, and loving God that He gave me an opportunity, through the gospel of grace and show me a way, a better path.
Again, my name is Pastor Greg. I'm actually the pastor here of the Arizona Korean Church. I'm happy to be here representing a diverse of believers in the Gilbert area. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Tio to launch us into our discussion at this time.
Thank you very much all for your willingness to be part of our forum this afternoon. I'm Geof, the Executive Director of the Community Care Chaplains. We plan to do this on a weekly basis to hold space for those who are actually affected and would like to contribute for the healing process of the challenges that we're facing right now, especially race relations that's happening, a lot of the issues that we're facing right now. So I'm going to go right away to something that would I consider quite important for us, and I would like to invite everybody to be quite personal, because that's, I think, where the meat's going to be. I'd like to invite Bishop Gary, and maybe eventually right away Pastor Jones, because of time concern here. If you could be willing enough to share how you are experiencing on a personal level race relations issue that is happening in our country right now.
Yeah, it's not something particularly that has happened to me personally. I can't express that from that vantage point for over the last several years. Now, probably in college, I had a couple experiences, but I can relate to some of the injustices, and now I'm on both sides because I have a lot of friends that's also officers as well, and just as I made a statement the other day to a couple other platforms, is that we can't just put everybody in the same category. There's always going to be a bad apple, whether it's somebody in the family or somebody in politics or someone in the law office or any of those categories. So I can't put everybody in the same box and say everybody have to be fired because of someone mistake. We always can get better. We can always transcend and evolve in life. And so I believe from my vantage point, I had a lot more pros than cons. And I would just leave off and just say that we all can get better and all grow and see how we can turn a negative experience into a great experience.
Yeah, Bishop, I just want to push a little bit more, because what we're looking here is, your exact experience, feeling wise, on a personal level. You've seen, your Black brothers, not only from George Floyd, but I think a number of people are actually presenting their struggle as far as race relation is concerned. On a personal note, what kind of emotional experiences were you having watching this tension that's going on, the crisis and the chaos and everything? As
a culture, I believe that we should handle, you can't deny emotion. Of course, racism has definitely been something that's been in existence for over 400 years or so. So that's not nothing that's strange. I think we have made some progress over the decades. Of course, when you see a situation like a George Floyd or a Trayvon Martin and young man, and we haven't even talked about some of the Latino brothers and sisters that have been infected. I think it's a lot of cultures that have been infected. But yeah, of course, you're going to show a lot of emotion. But as a culture, I would think that we want to try to stay out of being destructive, particularly breaking down our own community. We don't get anywhere doing that. But of course, the anger has been there. And of course, I think to some degree, we've all been profiled. And of course, it's not fair and it don't feel great. We definitely see it compared that the other culture have a lot more opportunity, even just our skin, like ethnicity, when it comes down to trying to buy certain things or you're trying to get in certain doors that particularly if you don't have a particular color skin that you couldn't get into. So fighting against the odds coming out is not always fair.
I'd like to make sure if I get the emotions that you were experiencing. You were using the word we. I would assume you meant yourself. You mentioned anger. Is that on a personal note? Is that what you were experiencing, watching things unfold? Is that where you were emotionally, the anger and the sense of unfairness and injustice?
More so painful. It's not, more so hurt. Not anger, but hurt. When you see a video that lasts for 8 minutes or so, when a a young man is being choked out for no reason at that time, and you can see he's been detained and handcuffs and things of that nature at that particular juncture of time. You more so you grieving because there's no other reason to be choked out and killed in public. So it was more so of a painful situation. I thought that we have come so far that didn't have to come down or in results that it did. So it was more of a painful situation.
Great, thank you very much. So you mentioned pain, hurt, and grief. Okay, I think that's a very important thing to know. Pastor Jones, responding to the same line of this question, where are you emotionally?
Well, this is obviously it's a very kind of tender subject. I know that when I watched that video, it was very hard to watch. It was very hard to watch the whole thing, but I forced myself to do it because I felt as though I needed to. And I just know that when I saw, I mean, just thinking back of my emotions since the George Floyd incident until now, one emotion I had was anger, actually. When George, especially when he cried out, "Mama, Mama," I mean, that just broke me at that point. I started to tear up, and I wanted to jump through my computer screen and rescue. Then there's frustration that these types of things happen, and then how does it's a difficult situation sometimes. For instance, as a Caucasian pastor, for instance. Now I have a diverse congregation with wonderful relationships across the spectrum, right? I mean, we're all brothers and sisters in the Lord. But it can be a difficult situation to speak into. So again, you have to push beyond what's comfortable. You got to trust the Lord. You have to talk and listen to a lot of people. I mean, that's one thing I've been doing a lot lately has been listening. A lot of listening and not as much talking, which is not normal for a preacher, right? We usually do a lot of talking, but I've been doing a lot of listening and a little bit of talking, and allowing our congregation to all speak into what's going on in our world around us right now.
Thank you very much. I would like to make Greg.
Yeah, Pastor, can I ask you
Sure.
just a follow up on
Yes.
that in relation before, because I know you have to go soon, but
I do.
Yes,
relating to your you mentioned diverse congregations, some of which are Black. What would
Yes.
you say the emotion of most of those who are Black? What would you say that emotion has been? How have you experienced that, and how have they been dealing with this?
Well, in the beginning, I felt like kind of just quiet as it relates to discussing it until I reached out more and asked to discuss and to talk. I did spend time on a Sunday morning, spent the entire service focused on just having a discussion about what's going on with the racial tension and hearing perspectives, because we have different perspectives, we have different experiences. I learned that back in the Ferguson situation happened when I had coffee with a dear friend of mine the morning after that event, and he almost didn't show up. He showed up, he was all stressed out. It wasn't his normal self. And I said, "Sydney, what is going on this morning?" And then he shared with me where he's coming from as a young mid-20s African American, and again, I almost wept because it's not my experience at all. I mean, it's something I've never experienced before. It's just not my history. It's not where I've been in my life. And it opened my eyes greatly. And so bringing it up and kind of just bringing it to the surface has been good. And there's been a lot more interaction, a lot more discussion. I don't know if I answered your question, Pastor Greg, but I tried.
You did. Thank
Okay.
you. I appreciate it.
I want to, I don't know how long you can stay, because I want to hear Sergeant Dan and then Pastor Cruz here, but Sergeant Dan, representing the police force, I think is something very important. Someone who could see from a very particular perspective. What's going on with the psyche of a police officer who's in charge in a particular situation. Because right now our heart goes with, of course, George, and it's just too much to see that. But I want to hear Sergeant Dan. I know it's hard for an officer to be a little bit going inside and sharing the kind of emotional experience, being a tough guy out there. But I'm going to invite you to do the same thing. Where are you in this picture emotionally?
So one of the emotions, and probably the most prominent emotion I have, is embarrassment. It's hard for me to say that, and again, this is reflecting my opinion and not the opinion of the police department. But when we look at this from a human factor, when I've worked in 3 departments, 2 in Florida and 1 here, and I've worked with a great bunch of people. I can't think of anybody in any of those departments that would represent police like the officer in Minnesota. And it just you take the human factor of it to where and I've always used this analogy over the last couple of weeks. If I'm sitting having coffee with a colleague in the morning and all of a sudden the radio starts beeping and there's somebody not breathing, we throw our coffee down, our food down, our donuts down, and we get in the car and we drive as fast as we can to fix that problem. So why did this person get treated differently when they're saying they couldn't breathe? And why wasn't that problem fixed, adjusted, changed, something to do what we do? And that's go out there and serve the people. And their expectation of us is a lot greater than what we saw on that video. So it has caused a great deal of embarrassment to me, to where I've changed a couple things about how I do things at home, where I wear my uniform. At the end of the day, I can take my uniform off and I can go out in public and no one knows what I do unless they already know me. And I still try to stick to the same ethics of, you help the elderly lady cross the street. You do all these little things in your personal life, but people don't know what you do, excuse me, for a living. And that's not the same for people of color, excuse me. So that's one of the things that embarrasses me the most.
It's powerful. Thank you for sharing. Let's hear from Pastor Cruz.
Okay. When I saw the video, my heart was very saddened first, very sad. Of course, anger, because nobody deserved to die this way or that way. Life is precious before God's eye, and I believe we had the right to live. And I was disappointed when I saw the video. Yes, anger builds up, but then also you seek God's wisdom, because at the moment I could not understand why this was happening in this country. Like, I believe someone said it earlier, if that would have been me recording that video, I would have dropped the camera. I would have jumped in. I would have defended a man's life without caring what will happen to me, because that's the way I was raised. I was raised as a Christian, always giving your thoughts and your love to other people more than yourself. Loving Jesus is loving your neighbor more than yourself. And I was willing to do anything, and it was very disappointed, but at the same time sad, because the sadness that it brings these issues, especially with the Hispanic community here in our church. We only have one Black family. He's from República Dominicana, and the rest, they're all Hispanics, white. And these issues, we have been talking about it almost daily with the people. We deal with these issues, we talk with them, But we also, I believe, what we have done, and I want you to know that I also belong to an alliance of pastors of the East Valley here in the state of Arizona. For the last 15 years, we have built the bridges. We have built the relationship with all the police departments in the state of Arizona. This started with Sheriff Arpaio like 15 years ago. Gascon, Chief Gascon, who went to San Francisco. Because when we were having issues with the immigrant community, you remember in those years, there was a lot of raids in the workplaces. People were being arrested. And we pastor, we shepherd those people. We care for them. These are people, they've been in this country 20, 15 years. They're good, advised citizens the way they live. They send their kids to school, they pay their taxes. So what we decided to do is starting to defending them or being the liaison between the community, the Hispanic community, the immigrant community, and us, the pastors. But what we found out that it was the best thing to do, it was to go and knock on the doors of these officials, of the sheriff, of the police department. If we have issues with the police department, with our community, and our churches, and our families, immediately we went and knocked on their door. We had conversations, and we have built a great relationship. We became friends with every chief of police in the state of Arizona, Hispanic pastors in the state of Arizona. We have done 5 law enforcement breakfasts. We have done this breakfast to honor them, to thank them, to build that relationship. And then in the last 2 years, we also invited the Department of Homeland Security, from all the Department of Homeland Security, and ICE, and then we brought our immigrant community to serve them breakfast in churches, free breakfast, and taking pictures with them and greeting them and talking to them. Because when we have the problems, we need to know what the solutions are. And I believe Jesus taught us to be in a table and talk to each other, find a solution.
We'll talk about the solutions, but right now in this circle, which I think what's being shared is already powerful. Eric Jones says anger. Sergeant Dan says embarrassment. And I think you were saying disappointment and pain, and I think there's also a little anger that led you to do some actions, Pastor Cruz. But what's
sadness?
And sadness, okay. And maybe Greg may share his emotions later, but I want to go back to Bishop Gary here. I think he is representing a very unique group of African American out there who is not actually dwelling on anger, but more on hurt. I want to understand that because the emotions that have been shared by Sergeant Ben, for example, embarrassment, that's a very powerful emotion. Thank you very much for being vulnerable in sharing that. And Eric Jones says anger. And yet we have, if Bishop Gary is representing, for example, because we are all representing particular groups here, if Bishop Gary is representing a particular group here who are actually dwelling more on the hurt, but not on the anger, I want to know more about that. Could you speak more to that, Bishop Gary? Because our members of our the forum here are actually on a little bit different kind of emotions.
Sure, and maybe it's because more of a seasoned person that's been around and seen on both sides of the fence here. Again, I grew up in a family that was all mixed. We had fluent Spanish persons living in my household. We had a Caucasian family that lived in my house because I came from a very diverse, even from Korean. My uncle served in the military and married Korean wives. So we were protect no matter what, and then we didn't have an opportunity to really see color in a sense. We recognized it, but in our case, we used that to our advantage. So we had to learn each other culture and to protect each other. Or we all had to go to the same schools in the neighborhood, things of that nature. So we built such a core that no one disrespected either party, no matter what color they were, because we were all one big family. And then a lot of our, some of the families went on to be officers, and whether they worked in politics, and of course some went down paths of incarceration and things of that nature. So I was able to see from a wider vantage point. So, over the years, we've seen a lot of, I think, it gotten somewhat better, but racism has always, been in effect for years. So there's something that I don't believe probably was going to change overnight, but I have seen that there were, progress being made. So that's why I say, in the beginning stages as a young man, yeah, you'll be angry because you'll see why is it that you being profiled because of your color, your skin, or perhaps you didn't have other opportunities, or why was it easy for a different culture to get something and than than yourself or myself in that sense. And so over the years, you have to learn how I've learned how to channel that anger and to have a broader and a wider understanding. So that's why. But with this couple of instances over the last recent stages, which George Floyd again, Trayvon Martin, and others, um, it seemed like it just started arising back up, and I thought we had made a pretty good turn. So again, just to really see that. It's not fair on all ends because someone is going to get hurt. Somebody just lost a son, a brother, and the same token, another life been lost because now the person who did the damage uh, can lose their life in a sense of imprisonment or whatever the case, or was down that road. Um, so it's just a painful situation as a whole. I don't think it's a win-win for anybody. So it just leaves pain, and that's something that I hope that we can deal with and channel, and see how we can be a better community.
Bishop Johnson, I have a follow-up for you. And Pastor Cruz, I hear
Yes, sir.
you, and and Sir Sergeant Dan, thank you for your feedback. But as I'm listening here, even Pastor Cruz, I ponder, I applaud your courage to say that I would go running even if it cost my life. That's a beautiful courage that I pray that I have in the real situation. I guess two questions. One for you, Sergeant Dan. You hear someone say you see that they would come running in. What would your reaction be to something like that, right? Because you're in a situation where you're trying to maintain control and authority and prevent chaos. So then if people start running in, I mean, what would I don't know. What would the natural reaction be for someone like you in that moment? And then that's your question, Sergeant Dan, if you don't mind responding to that. But Bishop Johnson, what I hear you speaking, and I hear what you're saying in the sense that you're from different you're raised with different groups of people, and I get it. I grew up in New York, so I grew up with the plethora of different races, right? But at the end of the day, if that's your son on the floor, what is your reaction? Is it just pain? I know how easy it is to disassociate because we're not that person, or we're not in that shoe, or that's not my environment right now. But if you personalize that to see your son, does that change how you feel right now, your raw emotion? So I'll defer to whoever wants to respond first to those questions.
Of course, that's definitely a anger that will arise. But wisdom do have to kick in from a sense. Do you see two people dead now? Now you lost a father and a son, um, versus keeping you cool and calm and trying to get through to them. So it because it's not a win-win. If the results still end up the same, if George, or whether it's my son or anybody else's son, still dies, now there's more casualties. There's more innocent bystanders that's being hit in the sense in that situation, because we're all taught to respect the authority at hand. So yes, the first initiation, again, we were taught to protect each other growing up. So we don't just sit by and let our brother, sister get beat on or get abused. So that's the first nature that kicks in action, is to protect. But then you have to look at, okay, in that situation, yeah, we can risk. So yeah, that we can risk it, but somebody else was going to die that day, and that's just the reality of the matter. Unless everybody came prepared with other guns and things of that nature to go to war. At that point, officers, I believe, and our sergeant can correct me if I'm wrong, but they were taught to protect and serve, and especially the force. So that would have been a tragedy that could have broke out across the board. That could have went wrong in a whole lot of different ways. Because that don't dismiss the anger, that don't dismiss the pain. But at that point, what is wisdom saying at that particular period of time?
Okay. I think it's very important to stay in this particular emotions, and then in contrast with what others are experiencing as well. Forgive me, Greg. We'll go back to your first question to Dan, but I'd like Sergeant Dan and Pastor Cruz respond to this is the observation. If you are embarrassed enough of what you have seen, for example, in the video, and yet you have a black pastor here, Bishop Gregory, for example, who's saying we have to listen to wisdom and see both sides. Black pastor, not angry, maybe in pain, but not angry. And we have Eric Jones, a white pastor, who says, but I'm angry. And a white police officer is saying, and I'm embarrassed. And yet we have a black pastor saying, hold on a second, what is wisdom telling us? How do you experience that contrast? Sergeant Dan, and then maybe Pastor Cruz.
So first thing I want to say is, from the department's perspective, and I have to put this out there, is not to get involved in a physical sense. So putting the phone down and going and charging that officer off of him, I don't recommend that in any way. Every officer is equipped in Gilbert with a camera. So if that happens here, there'll be a camera there. My suggestion is you pick up the phone, you call 911, and you say, this officer is not listening. He's doing this. Get a supervisor out here. Get somebody in charge out here. Get the ambulance going. Do something than to just sit there and film it, because it's already being filmed. We call that like the vapor lock. When officers get into high tense situations, the science shows your hearing starts to go, your vision starts to narrow, you get that tunnel vision. So, and to use the scenario, which I just said probably not to do, if someone came and knocked me over, picture yourself putting the phone down and walking up to that officer in Minnesota and pushing him off, you might be able to break that vapor lock, that tunnel vision he has. Again, I don't recommend it, but my emotions would, and this is just me speaking, of where would I be if someone did that to me? You're probably going to get arrested. There's no question about that for interfering. Whether the charges get pressed or not, or the prosecutor does anything, is a completely different story. But the emotion I would feel is the passion of people. I guess I don't really know how to answer that question, because no one really should do that. But in a hypothetical, if someone did that to me, in that situation, it may have saved a life. I can't say that would have done that in every situation.
Okay, let me go back to what's happening inside the circle. Thank you very much for that insight. I think that's very helpful, Sergeant Dan. So help me understand, say a little bit more about your embarrassment. You were talking about embarrassment a while ago. Say a little bit more about that, and then I'll try to connect to what Bishop Gary is saying.
The embarrassment that I feel is someone who wears the same uniform as me did something that I don't think I would ever do, or know anybody that would ever do. So that brought embarrassment upon me as a person and a police officer, to where it's going to take time for me to rebuild that. That's the main embarrassment part that I feel. I want the community to respect and trust me. And when you watch one video of one officer 2,000 miles away, it's gonna and the terrible outcome of that situation, that's gonna take a lot of time for me to rebuild. It's gonna take a lot of all of us, all 300 of us in this department to rebuild, and it's gonna be a long road.
Okay, so we have Eric Jones, who's no longer with us, but he was saying it brought anger. And then we have Bishop Gary, who says, but I think I see both sides. How do these two different responses speak to your experience of embarrassment? One, a white pastor saying, this makes me angry. A black pastor is saying, but I see both sides. How do this speak to your experience of embarrassment?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I don't know how to answer that. I really, off the top of my head, it's a difficult. And when you say both sides of it, are you saying the officer's side or the anger versus embarrassment? I'm not. Just want to make sure.
Well, Bishop Gary was talking about, he didn't experience anger, pain, yes, but not anger. And then his, correct me if I'm wrong, Bishop Gary, what I got from you is because you are up here trying to see, what's happening with the police officer and what's happening with, the black guy on the floor. So a lot of things going on in your mind as far as understanding is concerned. There's no anger, there's pain. But from Eric Jones' perspective, what are you talking about? This is outrageous. This makes me angry. And here you are as a man of uniform feeling embarrassment. And you're hearing other folks coming from a different perspective and experiences. Who could relate to you more? Who could relate with you more? The person who experienced anger or the person who's trying to see both sides?
Well, definitely the person that can see both sides, because I don't want all anger channeled at police officers. I want to work with the bishop who says, and I feel pain as well for George, but I think we go more solution-based and we build bridges going forward when we have someone willing to work on solutions instead of only being angry at the one act. Because I think we can all say not all police officers are like the officer in Minnesota. That's not me. That's not like anybody I work with, at least I think. So having someone who is open, willing, and can share the pain with me to where we can change the way we are and build some solution-based, some outcomes together going forward, that would be much better for me.
Great, thank you very much. I'm going to go to Pastor Cruz here as the only female in this forum, and I think it's fair to say that women are more in touch with their emotions than men. I want you to give feedback on how you experience the anger of Pastor Jones, and also the experience of Bishop Gary, who's not actually on the anger, but trying to stay up here and not in the heart, as a woman who feels, and you were so sad and passionately, actually emotional when you were sharing, the actions that you were talking about in response to this. How were you experiencing Bishop Gary and maybe even Pastor Eric Jones a while ago?
Well, like the sergeant said it very clearly, when we get angry and we get upset with our children, with our husbands and our family, we don't stay angry. Because if we stay angry, we will react to anger, and that's not a good result. I believe we need to find the solutions with the anger, with the sadness, disappointed. This is life. Life is disappointed everywhere. I come from a country, where I lived a coup when I was young in my country with the government. And I could have been angry and upset to the whole wide world for what was happening at that time with my dad, who was a miner in the coal mine in Chile. But what we did We activated ourselves. We united ourselves with the neighbors, help each other, feed each other. When someone needed something, we were there for them. So what I'm saying is, I'm not taking away. I don't want you think that I wasn't upset or angry at what happened. But if I stay angry and if I stay upset with the police department for one police officer, because this did not represent all the police officers that we serve, that we help, that we have relationship with, it was very difficult for us, the pastors, because since we have built this relationship, it's been so good.
Yeah, we're not
We don't want
talking
to stay
about.
angry.
Yeah, but we're not talking about someone staying angry here. In fact, we'd like to make room for someone who'd like to process their anger. That's why it's,
Yes.
but I think what I'm hearing from Bishop Gary is he as an African American pastor, as someone who could relate to a person like George Floyd, and I think it's safe to say that there might be other people who are being represented by Bishop Gary's take here. You experience being upset. You experience being angry. Eric Jones experienced being angry. Not Pastor.
Yes.
Not Bishop Gary here. This is not about staying angry. So maybe I'm going to invite Pastor Greg here as also another African American who you're watching right now and feeling these emotions. How are you experiencing?
Excuse me, can I ask you a question? What
Sure.
is the solution for this anger that we all feel? What is your solution that we need to deal with this anger and this disappointment? What is the solution for this? Because the solution is not what is happening in our country right now.
I understand. I understand that we are not actually in this circle. I don't see anyone actually who's stuck in that anger. Well, Pastor Jones is already out, but I don't experience him as someone who's stuck in that anger. Okay, so going back to this microcosm, I think something is more evident than someone who's being stuck in anger. I think there is a similarity among all of you, except for Bishop Gary's experience. Bishop Gary's experience is, unlike you who's being upset, Eric Jones being angry, Sergeant Dan is being embarrassed, Bishop Jones, I don't know if there is anger. I mean, I don't know if there's anger, because if there's no anger, there's nothing to process, unless it is actually being denied. And you cannot process something that's being denied.
It's not being denied. It's realizing that it's there.
I don't know. I don't know that.
Find solution.
I don't know that. I mean, before we solve it, we have to identify it.
Yes, I agree.
We cannot identify something if or we cannot solve something if it's not identified. But the issue here. Okay, I want to hear from you, Greg. So.
Yeah, no, Pastor Cruz, I think you're I'm hearing and I see your emotion. Actually,
you know me.
I see your raw emotion. I can appreciate that. Now, okay, this is what I'm processing in this moment. In this moment, this is how I'm processing this conversation and this experience. If you notice, I think what I'm hearing Geof ask and what Pastor Eric Jones shared in terms of his emotion was, I felt angry. You also shared that you felt angry, and if you were there, you would go do something about it, which is actually far from what we would even.
It's me.
You are emotional, right? You are that emotional.
I am a woman too. That's why. I'm a mother. I depend on my children.
Yeah, you're connected, right? You're connected to the emotion, right? And so you see pain, you're responding to it, and so I can appreciate that. I think what we're talking, what I'm seeing in contrast is, like, what is the Black experience, or what are some type of what emotions flow out of the Black experience? And so what I'm hearing and what I see from Bishop Gary, and I'm hearing from you, Bishop, is that, hey, I would like to experience, I may want to explore my emotion, but the only emotion that I can really explore or share is pain. can't really express anger, because if I express anger, if I even tried to do something in the moment, I would be killed, and that would be two people who would be gone.
Mhm.
In many ways, as a
Hold on a
black
second.
person,
Hold a second, Greg. I wanna check in with Bishop Gary if that's actually what he's saying, because we don't want to put words in his mouth. Okay.
sure,
Okay.
absolutely,
Is
sure.
that what you're saying, Bishop Gary? If you express your anger, you would end up killing someone?
Not that he would kill someone, but that he would end up getting hurt or
Or
harmed.
okay. Is that what you're saying?
So in that,
Because I didn't hear that from him, Greg. So I just want to make sure that's what he's saying.
Yeah, correct what Pastor Greg is saying. So in a sense, again, you don't lose now one person, now you lose two persons, because we're trained automatically not to usurp our authority at that present time. So anger could just lead to more deaths at that present time, meaning because you don't charge officers.
So
So yeah.
what do you make of Pastor Eric Jones' anger?
Well, he's speaking from that's your first act of emotion, of course, anger.
Yes.
But do you act upon it? That's a different story.
Well,
So yeah, you could be anger, and again, also it may express the pain because of what's going on in that situation. So, but if you just jump out in anger, that can get a lot of other people hurt in a fast period of time. So, for those that don't know how to channel that anger, then they end up in a bad position.
okay, anger is an emotion.
I'll have to ask you.
Bishop Gary, anger is an emotion in response to something that is not fair, something that is unjust. I think that's why we, as created in God's image, that's part of our makeup. When something is not fair, we respond, and the emotion that usually comes up is anger, because it's not fair. Meaning, in other words, what we're saying, this makes me upset because something is not just, something is not fair that's happening. Have you experienced that emotion? Because there's nothing wrong experiencing that emotion. There's nothing wrong. That means you sense it. You sense something that is not fair.
Absolutely. But the way you act on that emotion, because you said it's also a corresponding action. And I was always taught in that in a heated battle, never respond to anger, no matter what condition or position a person is in.
Great.
Because anger can lead to violence. But now when you react out of pain, in a sense, you hurt, and it's more of an infliction in a sense. You may not act the same way as a person that would act out of anger. So in this case, like the sergeant said, I would agree, because I know if, especially in you're asking me, so I can't speak for the average person perhaps, but my cases, I normally do have captains and sergeant phone numbers in my cell phone. So in that case, I would immediately pick up my cell phone, and ask the captain or a sergeant or sheriff in charge, what's going on here? Is there anything we can do before that? So yes, you already had a group of people filming the situation. So now my question, let me get to the main source so we can hurry up and bring a solution to the matter. And I think if someone would have took that approach at the same time, we probably would have saw a different outcome.
Okay, I'm going to make room for the rest.
So in light of what Bishop Johnson has just said, right, it's almost as though, and others I think would other blacks, when I say others, I'll be more specific, but I'll say other blacks would probably have this same or similar sort of thought process. Let me not express my anger on the scene, or even if I'm expressing it, I have to be careful how I express it, because I know there could be an adverse impact from expressing it. And in some ways, there was, again, a black guy on the scene who was experiencing or expressing his anger, like, hey, get off, do, and it wasn't being listened to or heard. So it's ironic, though. It's ironic that the ethnicity who should be experiencing the anger and probably be even free to experience the anger, some can't experience that anger, or can't show, not even to just display it, But even Pastor, and I can't really speak for him, but Pastor Eric had shared it. He was angry, and he was able to express it. It was like the first emotion that came off. He was kind of free to express that. Most blacks that you hear, they probably don't start by expressing anger. You'll probably hear, I was saddened, I was hurt, and then I got angry. It's almost as though anger is not the first emotion that we can experience, because we have been taught that if you do, it can have a negative impact on you. And so it is ironic, though, that other ethnicity, that Pastor Cruz, she experienced her anger. Pastor Eric experienced his anger, but as a black person, anger is one of the last things, it seems, that some of the culture, not everyone, but some of the culture have experienced, because of the fear of what can happen if they allow themselves to even demonstrate it or show it, if that makes sense to others.
Well, we have John Smith last week. He was quite upfront with his anger and how he was quite upset with what's going on. So I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, but he started out with saddened. He said, if you notice, he said, I was first saddened. Then he said, I went to anger. And then I turned that anger into advocacy. So
Okay.
He started out feeling saddened versus angry at first.
Sure. Now, here's the thing, and I think I'm going to give you time to respond to this, okay? A person is telling his or her story, a story of pain. And how do I get others to hear my story? Now, if it's a story of injustice and something that is not fair, of course, as you could see in the protest, there's a lot of anger, and sometimes it goes to violence. Okay, people are telling their stories the way they know how. Other people are trying to listen. Police officer would like to listen. Pastors would like to listen, and sometimes they are participating in storytelling. So, and I think this is a good reflection for our for Black community in general, if this is what you're saying, Pastor Greg, that they don't want to touch anger when they talk about their narrative because of their own experience. When they go to anger, the more they are not hurt. That's what I'm getting from you.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't want to underplay the importance of personality, because I think personality has a huge part to play in response to situation. So Pastor Johnson, in his personality, he chose, okay, let me go to wisdom, or go to the head and think about before I do something. Pastor Cruz, her personality was, okay, I need to defend, I need to at least speak up. Someone else with a different personality may go to another emotion of sadness first. And I could be generalizing when I say that, blacks in general, when it comes to a situation, we kind of know that, hey, if we try to do something in that situation, it's not going to end good, right? So the fear that maybe police officers may feel or experience, then let me just say, maybe police officers feel, okay, black, if it's another black person, that may become fearful, or that tunnel vision that happens, that Sergeant Dan spoke about, happens maybe because fear is coming on. I don't know, but maybe another black person talking and experience or expressing anger may actually make them fearful and shut things down. But what I'm saying is that we of ourselves already know that we can't elevate the situation. We can't elevate the environment or that moment, because things will only get worse. So the fear that they may have that we would elevate it is something that we've been kind of taught to say, let's not try to elevate it because that's going to make things worse. If that makes sense to you, Sergeant Dan, do you understand what I'm saying to you in that or no? So I think sometimes officers have a fear where, as blacks, we are trying to be very cautious of not overreacting because we know it can only lead to something different. However, as a Caucasian or maybe Latino or maybe another ethnicity, maybe they are more free with saying, okay, I can express that emotion of anger because they've never been trained to suppress it. So they can show it. Whereas with blacks, we kind of like, okay, you know what, let's not do the wrong thing because we don't want it to escalate.
I want to get
And
response, Greg. I want to get response from Sergeant Dan and Elizabeth Cruz. But this is what I'm hearing from you. This talks about freedom. A white person is more free to express anger, but not black person. That's what I'm hearing from you. And the response to you, and the response from you, Dan, as a white person as well.
I think people can express their anger equally. I don't know. I don't look at color as this deciding factor of saying, someone can express their anger more or less than someone else. So no, I don't agree with that.
Mr. Cruz?
I don't agree with that either. I believe anger is a feeling of the human emotions, and doesn't matter what color of skin, what background you have, anger is anger, and you can express that anger. But here I go again. Find the solution for the anger. Don't stay angry because it's not healthy for you.
We will go there. But what does it make? Okay, but here you are. Hold on a second, Greg. Okay, here you are, Pastor Cruz. You said you were upset. Eric Jones says he was angry. What do you make out of this when you see our bishop here saying, "But I'm not angry"? So you are more angry or more expressive. Maybe I'm not quite sure if I think following Greg's point a while ago, that there is anger, except that they are afraid to express it because white folks or others are more free in expressing it compared to their kind of culture, environment, and situation, which you said you didn't agree.
But see, the same thing I could say for the Hispanic community, for the immigrant community, okay? Their complaint has always been, or our complaint, that we have not been heard, that they don't listen, they don't hear us. But it's up to us, the leaders, to teach young people, families, to open those ways of communication so we can be heard, so they can hear us. But Jesus did the perfect thing, sit at the table with the disciples and talk about the solutions of the world. And I believe that's what we need to do instead of staying with anger. Again, I don't find that it's a group of Hispanic, white, black, doesn't matter. Everybody's angry about something because life is unfair. Yeah. There is a lot of injustice in this world. But let's find the solution. That's what my goal is. And we're doing that in our church with the young people. We have 1/3 of our congregation, Pastor Greg, you know that. It's young people, teenagers and young adults. And we sat with them the other day to talk about these issues. Express your anger, express your feelings and emotions. But then we also bring what God's word says about bringing peace, having comfort in your spirit. And also you have issues, deal with them immediately. I'm going to tell you something. When this thing happened, when this situation happened in the country, I had a family that had to come to my house and to make a police report because they were afraid to call the police. Yes, the Hispanic people sometimes are afraid to call the police also because of things that happened in the past. So what we did, they came to my home, were the pastors, and we had 3 or 4 different police cars from the Mesa Police Department. They came and took the report of a crime that was being committed. Now, thank God we were here, thank God we were involved, thank God we opened the conversation with them, because otherwise they felt intimidated. But we've been doing that for years, and we love that because the results are great. Also with the Gilbert Police Department, we have done so many community forums, information. I think people need to be more educated on these issues also. Open up our churches and bring the police department to talk to them, and allow the young people to ask a question. Doesn't matter what they sound like.
But
And then we will see.
But Pastor Chris, I think Greg is educating us as well. I'm going to give you a chance to respond to Greg, but let me just point this out. What you're educating this group so far, and we are a microcosm. What I'm hearing from you is the fact that you cannot express your anger freely, that there is a race relation issue. That's what I'm getting from you.
There are the racial issues everywhere in our country and other countries.
But see, Pastor Cruz, you're again, you're pretty free with your expressions, right?
Thank you.
You're pretty free with your expressions of anger and emotions and all that. And I'm saying to you, Sergeant Dan, and again, you weren't able to feel that or to understand that because you're like, well, no, everyone should be free to express emotion.
Yes.
And you both say no, you don't think that's an issue because everyone should be free to express their emotion. But here we have a Bishop Gary, and I know he's still there quiet, but and I'll share even personally for me, I was angry, but you know when what I got, the first emotion that I experienced, it was sadness.
Me too.
It was sadness. I was sad. Then I went to anger, but then also I experienced fear. In the whole thing, it's like, okay, what can I do? What if I should do anything, right? And I'm just saying, like, if there's something within the system that we have to acknowledge, where that depending on the color of your skin, you have the opportunity to express yourself more freely than others. You have because especially as a Black person, you have to be more cautious because you don't want the situation to go wrong real quickly, and it can go wrong quickly just because of the color of your skin.
I'm going to ask Pastor. I'm going to ask Sergeant Dan what he is hearing from you because those are two different kind of opinions. So you were clarifying why you think those who are not Black have more freedom to express their emotions, and you are emphasizing again the fact that because there is race relation issues. So I wanna see what Sergeant Dan was hearing from you.
First, I want to say the question to me was, how am I personally originally an hour ago? I felt sad and angry as well. I'm not suppressing that emotion personally, that I'm not sad and angry as well. So I still feel everybody has that right to feel that emotion that they're feeling, regardless of color. I don't see what makes it different. So just kind of, that's my stance on it.
No, so I actually agree with you. I actually agree with you both. I believe that everyone has the right and should have the right to express their feeling. The reality of being able to express that right, though, is different.
Do you feel what a Black person like Pastor Greg, for example, do you feel what they feel in terms of, instead of expressing anger, they experience fear? You know, they are angry, but they are afraid to express it because it might lead to something worse. Something that, what I'm hearing from Pastor Greg, something that you don't have to worry about. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. And I mean, from me personally, anyone around me who wants to experience or feel sadness, they should not fear me. But that's easy for me to say because you don't know me, but I also don't know you. And that's, again, the big solution here is we get to know each other and we get to know how each other thinks and
That's right.
operates, to where if I see you on a scene or something like that, we know each other and we know what each other thinks and how each other feels. But I can't speak for 299 other officers on how they feel Pastor Brooks, how they think when he expresses his anger and emotion. I'm a person, I'm 46 years old. I've been around a lot of people. I grew up in Miami, Florida, okay, during the riots in the 80s, and went to a high school that was 40%, African American. And I am very comfortable around different races, and that's how I grew up. And I've seen their pain. I've had friends in classes who lived in neighborhoods in Miami that were on fire. Gilbert is 3% Black. There's people here who don't have interactions with other races or other cultures. It's not wrong. It's not bad. It's just, it is what it is. If they don't go out and seek it. So when you ask me personally, I want to hear the anger, the frustration, the emotions of other people. And that helps me as a person when I'm out on a scene in how they feel.
But let me follow up on that though.
Sure.
So you're saying that if you were on a scene, you came to a scene, and I'm there, that you would be okay with me expressing my anger in that moment when it could potentially escalate things? So you're telling me calm down, calm down. I'm like, no, I'm not going to calm down. I'm upset. And typically, that only goes down a wrong path, because then it's okay. You need to listen to me. I'm the officer here on scene. You need to listen. You need to keep quiet. Are you telling me that we really have the opportunity to experience or express anger?
Yes. If you're not interfering with something I'm doing. So let's say the call is not with you, it's with these people over here, whoever they may be. And you don't like the way I'm handling it, you let me finish handling it, and then I'll say, Mr. Brooks, can we talk over here? And then you can vent to me all day long how you felt about it, as long as it's not interfering with what I'm doing. And that's anybody. You could say, sir, can I talk to you over here when you're all finished? And you can express all your emotion in the world. I'm a negotiator. I'm crisis trained. I will listen to anybody, because I know venting is the number one thing people want to do in times where they feel something is not right, and I will let them vent, and I know how to talk to them. But that's not everybody, so I can't speak for the entire department.
And that's where I can appreciate what you just said, right? You're a negotiator, and in other words, a peacemaker. So for you, you're going to be looking to hear both sides of the story, and you want that. But not every officer has that personality. There's some officers with a different personality, where if you bring anger in, and if they're someone that doesn't like being challenged, or authority is being challenged, it automatically triggers something else.
Yep, I agree.
You know what I'm saying? So
Would I ask a question? Can I ask a question about that myself?
Yeah, go ahead.
If a police officer stops somebody, regardless what it is, does the police officer has the right to tell that person to just calm down and to wait for the process to go through what is going to happen? Because what I have seen also is when people resist arrest because of their anger, and that's not a good trait to have. It's not something good to react to, because you're angry, then you resist arrest and you resist to respond to the questions, and then police officers become also, they have to defend themselves, they have to protect themselves. I have seen that, and that is not a good thing either. So are we also teaching our young people, Black people, Hispanic people, to respect authority, to respect police officers when they say something? Because if you're going to fight something, go to court and you can win your case over there instead of fighting it in the street with a police officer. That's the part that I do not agree when these issues come up with the anger. because we all have the right to control our anger too. Doesn't matter what it is.
So
Yeah, so Pastor Cruz, to your question. Oh, go ahead,
I
Sergeant Dan.
support the comply and complain. You've
Yes.
heard it before. You comply. When the officer
Comply.
does something, you comply. There's, to me, 100% chance nobody gets hurt, both the officer
Yes.
or the person in question, if you comply. You take your ride, you complain later. We have body cameras, we have witnesses, we have all of these things, and you complain. And there is a process that will go through, and if the officer is wrong, they're subject to discipline. So comply and complain is what I'll tell anybody to do when they have an issue with an officer in the department.
Right.
And I think you will see, Pastor Cruz, to your question, Sergeant Dan, to your response, and I know we're getting on short on time, so we'll try to speed this along to finish. Yeah, we'll be mindful. But to your point, and to your question, Pastors, and to your point, Sergeant Dan, I think what you will find, and again, I'll go back to this understanding personalities. So, Pastor Cruz, I know you said, okay, I don't believe in anger. I don't believe in expressing myself, right?
That's not what I said.
That moment. Oh, I thought you said you don't believe there's a right. Okay, maybe I'm wrong. I thought you said that you don't believe that you should express your anger.
That's not what I said, Pastor. What I said, when a police officer stops anybody, doesn't matter black, Hispanic, white, doesn't matter Asian. When a police officer stops somebody, if that person becomes angry, why do you stop me? The color of my skin, your race, whatever. Okay, I believe that person needs to control their anger and wait for the police officer to do their job and explain to you why they stop you. And yes, you have a right to express your anger, but not to the officer because he is acting according to the law and you broke the law.
Okay. So I'm hearing two sides. I'm hearing two things from you, right? This is what I'm hearing from you, and maybe I'm the only one, and I'm really, really trying to hear. But what I'm hearing is, if a police officer stops you, you should have respect. Don't do anything. Don't comply and all that. Is that what you just said?
Comply and follow his direction, what he's telling you to do.
Yes, I'm just repeating what you said. Is that so?
Yeah,
would you say
that's what I heard too? Okay, next.
Yeah.
Okay, so I hear you say comply, but then I hear you say, if I'm at the George Floyd scene, I'm going to put my phone down. I'm going to rush in there, which means that you're responding in your anger and you're not really complying. So which is it?
I do not understand your question, Pastor Greg. I'm sorry. I'm confused now.
You're saying if a police, you're saying if you're in a situation, you are free to show your emotion and your anger. You should be free to show your emotion and your anger. That's what you said. That if you were there, George Floyd, you would stand up for the injustice. You would step in and try to do something. Okay.
Yes.
So that's you expressing your anger and your stance against the injustice that you're seeing.
Because a man is being killed, Pastor Greg. A man's life is being taken away before my eyes. And if I see a man's life taken away before my eyes, of course I'm going to act with anger. Very angry, very upset. And I will do what it takes for me to do something about it. Of course, like everybody been saying, I'm not gonna just jump in and be shot. But if I have to, we have to give our life for one another. That's what I'm saying. But there's two situations here, two circumstances totally different that you are putting together.
No, not putting together. I'm really the one thing I'm pointing out, not the situations, but I'm talking about the emotion. The emotion is anger.
The emotion, yes. You're saying, anger, yes.
We've talked, and I think you both, Sergeant Dan, said it's okay to express anger. But what you've just said with the comply is don't really express anger. Just go along with what the officer says, comply, and then complain later, right? That's what I'm hearing.
That's what the law says.
I understand. If you understand, I really hope you're hearing. I'm hoping that you're hearing what, and I think one of the beautiful things here is that with this video, we can all go back and kind of watch and relearn what we missed.
Greg, what do you think is not being heard as far as your concern goes?
What I'm saying is that I don't think that the understanding of the personalities or the ability to express the emotion you have is being understood by Sergeant Dan and Elizabeth Cruz. What I've said before is I agree. Blacks, we will try to comply. If you understand, even if the situation, Fernando Castillo, where he was in the car, he would say, "Hey, I have a gun in the glove compartment." He was complying. He was doing everything. He was talking, and he still was shot. Right. So for blacks, we've been trained not to resist or not to, in some ways, you know. We've been trained to.
Okay.
Huh?
Okay, I get it.
What was that?
I'm sorry.
Okay, I have to go in a few minutes.
Okay.
I have something
let's recap things here. Let's recap things.
Please.
Okay. I'm going to share some of my observation. Then I'm just going to let you respond to that as one way to recap things. Okay. One, all of us here have emotions, and even though anger is not actually touched even by Bishop Gary, I think Greg has give us an understanding that anger was there, except that as a black person, they don't just express it more freely than, non-black. But so anger is quite common. One thing is not common though, and I think this is the reason why race relation really is an issue. Fear. Greg experienced it, and maybe Bishop Gary experienced it. That's why he didn't go to anger right away. But the fact that there is fear, something that we haven't mentioned. We mentioned sadness, we mentioned embarrassment, we mentioned anger. But one thing that we didn't mention actually is fear, which is very much true to our black members of the forum here. But I think if we continue to explore, and we didn't have enough time, for us to understand where that fear is coming from, I think we will come to a place where we could relate more to one another. Because if they are alone in that fear, we may have think of a lot of solutions, Pastor Cruz. Maybe the solutions that we're thinking is how to save, George Floyd's life. That's wonderful. But that's not the only problem. The problem actually is the racism that's happening. I mean, calling someone 911 is good. I mean, it will save someone's life. I mean, I like Sergeant Dan's suggestion. But that doesn't address the race relation. It doesn't. Many black people would still end up being afraid. But I think what we haven't discussed here is, how am I hearing your fear? And are you telling your story in a way that I could actually appreciate? There is an encouragement from Sergeant Dan and Pastor Cruz to tell your story, even if the emotion is anger. You have the right and the freedom to do that. But at the same time, we are failing to recognize that it's not easy. It's not easy for you guys. It's easier for others, but not for you. I think that's a very big, starting point for us to address in order for us to actually find healing in this particular issue. That's what I'm getting from this discussion. Any thoughts to close?
Well, I would like just to say that we will all be looking for solutions individually. When we have these issues, we will have more peace in this world. Be friendly, relationship, build it up. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity that we have been able to do that in the state of Arizona with all the police officers and all the departments. There's rotten apples everywhere. There's bad officers everywhere. But let's build those bridges and help each other to understand so we can have better places to live in this earth. so we can get along with one another. I thank you very much. God bless you. And hopefully we can, I don't know, do this again, but those are my thoughts and my personal experience, what I have spoken. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sergeant
Thank
Ben?
you, Pastor Cruz.
Thank you. And you're invited to the next breakfast next year. We're going to do it in Apache Junction with all the police department, all the chief of police, and all our friends to have, and Department of Homeland Security too. They're coming to help us with the immigrant community.
Let's go around the circle and then we will do the closing. I want to hear from Sergeant Dan too.
Well, I want to thank you for allowing me to be part of this. I hope we move forward together as a community, as representatives of our community, to help bridge all the gaps that we have. So I appreciate being part of this. I appreciate the invite. It was really nice to meet all of you, and I hope we can get together soon.
Absolutely wonderful dialogue. I think it's a great thing to open up the discussion and have it. And no matter how painful or angry or sad it may be, I think it's a great start to great success. And I want to thank you all for inviting me. Pastor Gregory and Pastor Elizabeth had also shared with me about this platform. So I'm definitely happy to be a part of it. And again, we're here to do whatever we can to help our community and our society as a whole to deal with this issue and hopefully bring about a great solution. So appreciate you all.
I think my closing thought would be, oftentimes we're looking for a solution when we already have one, and the solution begins with understanding someone else. And I think the biggest problem here was like, oh, well, let's sit down and get a solution. Let's sit down and talk and get a solution. But one of the things that's evident to me is if you don't have the spirit to understand, if you don't have the spirit of being ready to empathize, of really hearing someone's story, of really hearing what someone is saying, then really what is happening is that it's a one-way conversation. The message is being sent from you, or the message may be sent from someone else, but it's not being received. And the hope for a dialogue such as this is that we will see the barriers or the boundaries that we may be placing or putting up. We're saying we're receiving the message, but hopefully we can also see that maybe we're not really, or action is not really matching the talk. But if we're not willing to actually listen and empathize, then I don't think we have a way or a solution forward. And so I think from this exercise, it's the importance of really being heard, the importance of empathy and understanding both sides, and then being able to then see that there is more between us that connects us than what separates us.
You know what, Pastor Greg, I think there's a fantasy out there that if we do more outside, that we will achieve solutions. But I think the way we measure solutions is in this small circle. If we live this forum, felt more understood, I think we have made one step closer to the solution. But if we didn't feel that, regardless of what you do outside the circle, and I commend you for doing a lot of things outside the circle. But you can't measure the success of the solutions out there. If inside the circle, we haven't made a progress, out there is just for show. Forgive me, because this is a microcosm of what's happening out there. But if we are doing something great, that we feel that like we are heard and understood on both sides in this small circle, that's a very good way to measure, our progress towards solutions. Thank you very much for coming and joining us. I really appreciate it. I hope we can do more like this.